Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Ma'Khia Bryant, Andrew Brown Jr., Donovan Lynch. More names added to what feels like an ever-growing list of black and brown people killed by police. According to an NPR investigation, police officers have fatally shot at least 135 black men and women across the country since 2015, with at least 75% of the officers who shot identifying as white. People have taken to the streets in protest. But what are the police officers saying? What is their reaction to the shootings? How is the morale in light of the Derek Chauvin verdict? And what do they want us, the community, to know about what it takes to protect and serve? A candid conversation with police. That's next on Another View after this national and local news from NPR and WHRV News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Sadly, Hampton Roads and Northeast North Carolina have not been spared from fatal police encounters with black men. Elizabeth City, North Carolina remains in a state of emergency after the killing of Andrew Brown Jr. Protests have been peaceful, but frustration with law enforcement is running high. Questions still surround the killing of Donovan Lynch in Virginia Beach. Nationally, 6 people were killed by police in the first 24 hours after a jury found Derek Chauvin guilty of murdering George Floyd. We've heard the anguish and frustration of the black community. But what about the police? How are they dealing with the calls to defund the police? How do they feel about the so-called bad apples among their ranks? And is there a way to restore trust between police and the black community? Joining us for some real talk from the police perspective is Chief Larry Boone, Chief of the Norfolk Police Department. Hi, Chief Boone. How are you?
Hello, Barbara. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good to have you back again. Thank you so much. Chief Kelvin Wright, Chief of the Chesapeake Police Department. Hello, Chief Wright.
Good afternoon, Barbara. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, too. Thank you again for joining us. And retired Durham, North Carolina Police Captain Daniel Edwards, who now provides de-escalation and cultural and situational awareness training to law enforcement through his company, Critical Perceptions. Daniel, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. So my first question to you, gentlemen, I am asking for your answer from a law enforcement professional perspective. And the question is this: if you have a daughter or a son, and they came to you and said, I want to be a police officer, what would you tell them? Let's start with you, Chief Wright.
Thanks, Barbara. Up until about a year ago, I would certainly encourage them and would welcome them to get involved in the criminal justice system, particularly in law enforcement. But of late, the last 12, 13 months, it has been a strain for us, I would dare say. The things that have happened that have made significant media attention and the reactions by the public, some of it justified, some of it perhaps a little not, really would give me pause and concern for the mental health and welfare of my sons. I have 2 sons that are adults. One of them was going to become a police officer but decided to do something else. But law enforcement has changed, or the attitudes towards law enforcement has changed, and I think that we want the very best people in law enforcement. You want people in law enforcement who have a passion for the job. You don't want someone to just be in the job to earn money. And I dare say that I've seen what it's taken on with regards to other people, and I would have some very strong reservations.
Okay. Daniel, same question to you. As a law enforcement professional, you training with officers, if your son or daughter came to you and said, I want to be a police officer, what would you tell them?
I would first evaluate my child and see if they have it, because as Chief Wright says, it's not just a profession. It has to be a lifestyle in order to connect. You have to be able to understand the community in which you serve. And even before you even do policing, you need to know you. You need to understand all the biases that's been preset in your system and have a good way of communicating. Policing has changed greatly in the past year. And right now it's the matter of resetting, and it starts with training. Mm-hmm. So I would say yes, but I would have to really evaluate my child's ability. And a lot of it has to do with me, because my son is a reflection of me. A lot of the things I do, he's watched. So I am my best recruiter when it comes to policing if one of my children were to decide to go into law enforcement.
Okay. Chief Boone?
Well, I will just say I have two daughters, and their perspective on law enforcement is not the best. So I wouldn't have to convince them to join the profession. They've already made up their mind that's something they do not want to do. Mm-hmm. As Kelvin and as Daniel has indicated, the landscape has changed. 30 years ago, this was an opportunity for folks to join an organization to do good. The community, and rightfully so, is demanding that we be better. And we have gotten better, but we still have a lot of work to do. Mm-hmm. So I'll yield right there with respect to that question, because it's already been hammered.
So would any of you change your perspective, take off your law enforcement hat, and as Black men, would you change your answer at all? Chief Boone?
No, I would still join the profession. Mm-hmm. Knowing what I know, it's been very good to me, and there's a whole lot of good that the women and men of this profession provide every day. Mm-hmm. We're just going through a rough patch, and these things happen every decade or so, and we'll level out. We'll make reforms, and then the next thing will happen. But law enforcement's been around a very, very long time. Our department is 223 years old, and the community, you need police. Otherwise, you have anarchy. So we'll find a way to smooth this out, and we'll get the right people to do the job, and we'll be fine. Okay. We will recover.
Daniel, from a personal perspective, any change in your? Is there a difference in the way you think about policing as a Black man in this country?
There is, and I think, I know we have to be there. We cannot not take the job, because oftentimes within our communities, we have young people that look like us. And if they don't have a face that they can connect with, it creates even a greater barrier for them trusting. And we have to be able to establish trust. When I was a captain, I very rarely introduced myself as Captain Edwards. I introduced myself as Daniel, because the captain, he comes with some baggage that I didn't pack. So I have an opportunity to introduce them to Daniel. And that's worked for me.
Okay. What about you, Chief Wright?
Well, Barbara, I remember when I told my parents I wanted to be a police officer and join the police department, I don't think that they were very happy that was the case. Really, they were not happy that occurred. But as Larry said, looking back over my career, knowing the positive effect that I've had and the ability to affect change on this organization and perhaps the profession, I think it's been well worth it. But, Daniel said something as well. The key is to look at oneself and know what baggage you bring to the job, but also know what assets you bring so that you can indeed have change. I'm like Daniel. When I meet people, I'm Kelvin. Like I said, Chief Wright is my title, but I am Kelvin. At the end of the day, when I go home, I'm Kelvin. And I don't mind being that personal type of person to simply say, I'm Kelvin. I'm here. Let's talk. Let's see how we can work things out.
So, Chief Boone brought up the fact that, we've had this long history of policing in our country, and there are a lot of, particularly my listeners, who may not understand why there is such distrust of the police within the Black community. I've asked Lisa Godley, our producer, to put together a brief but very succinct history of policing in America. Let's take a listen and we'll talk on the other side.
The origins of police can be traced back to the colonies. As far back as the 1630s, the men who volunteered to protect the colonists were identified only as the Night Watch. In the South, the history was a little different. The first form of policing began in 1704 in the Carolina colonies as the Slave Patrol. Their job? To capture runaway slaves. These patrol groups were made up of as many as 6 men on horseback who would ride carrying whips, ropes, and guns. They made it a point to release terror in the enslaved communities. The thinking, as long as the enslaved were afraid, they would not rise up, fight back, or run away. These patrol groups were prominent until the Civil War and eventually gave way to the Ku Klux Klan. By the mid-1800s, the North was looking for a way to control the growing number of immigrants. The original settlers argued that the new immigrants were ruining American society. The Night Watch was useless against those the settlers described as lewd, disorderly, and prostitutes. The first official police force started in 1838 in Boston. 7 years later, New York would establish its own police force, followed by Chicago, New Orleans, and Cincinnati. But the system was far from perfect. Time magazine reported that America's political machine had produced corrupt politicians and corrupt police officers. By the early 1900s, the man known as the father of modern policing, August Vollmer, introduced a new form of policing. This new system stressed the importance of social work and psychology in police work. It also created a separate system for juveniles so they would not have to be tried or punished as adults. The 1960s marked a turning point. African Americans began to challenge the way police treated them. There were boycotts, peaceful protests, and riots, challenging racial profiling and police brutality. Police responded with harsh tactics, including tear gas, attack dogs, and high-pressure water hoses. Throughout the 21st century, police have been called out over and over again for their treatment of African Americans and other minorities. As a result, some policies like stop and frisk in New York have been reformed, and many departments have implemented body cameras to record encounters with police. But the senior curator at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, William Pretzer, says real change boils down to this: eradicating the social inequalities that perpetuate unbalanced police-community relationships that for centuries have sustained a distrust and frustration on both sides. For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
So there's frustration and anger on both sides. And Chief Boone, what keeps you up at night as you deal with your troops, your force, in terms of policing the city of Norfolk, but also balancing all the other things that are happening in our country today, and how your officers are feeling about that?
Well, right now, as we've all highlighted, right now it's very, very tenuous in this profession. The things that concern me is that we have a host of officers that go out here every day and do a very difficult job, and they understand that they need to treat people with dignity and respect. My concern is that something goes wrong and the community calls for the firing or resignation of the officer without affording the officer his or her due process. Now, since I've been chief, I fought back on those type of requests when it was warranted, and I wanted to ensure those officers received their due process. Now, Barb, I'm going to be real frank here. My Caucasian officers feel as though they're being judged before they even walk out the door or get out the car. And we teach our recruits that that's going to happen based on some of the things that Lisa just covered. But what I would ask the community to do is at least give us the benefit of the doubt until a proper investigation can be completed. I think we earned that with our community outreach, with our engagements. These officers work awfully hard to build trust, and there are going to be times where the community is not going to be happy. But I think I've demonstrated that I am always going to make the right decision. So to answer your question right now, the morale of my officers are in the tank, particularly with my Caucasian officers, because they feel as though they're not getting a fair shake.
You know, Chief Boone, I got to ask you, too, about the, I know that you're going to tell me this is a personnel issue, but the officer who was just let go because of making the contribution to the Rittenhouse fund, are you worried that there are other, that officer was discovered based on a breach of the, based on a computer breach? Are you worried that there are other people within the force, and really this goes to you too, Kelvin, in your force that may be feeling that way or may be in support of more white supremacist activity, et cetera, and how that impacts their ability to do their job, particularly if they're patrolling the Black community?
Well, let me answer it this way first. That incident, and I'm limited in what I can say, was not merely about a donation. That's not the issue. The issue is the comments associated with the donation.
And I should have said that. There was comments and the donation. That was an issue. Yeah.
So, you know, my hope would be that I don't have an organization that support white supremacy, and I'm not saying the officer is part of that group. But, you know, I'd be naive to think that there aren't others. And I always say this, you know, and we must say this, most officers are good officers. But every police chief in this country, they know they got a couple bad apples.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. What questions do you have about policing in this area? 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Daniel, when you're training officers in terms of interpersonal relationships and so forth. I remember when I worked for the Prince George's County Police Department in Maryland, and I used to hear some officers who did not live in the communities that they served, and they really had a pretty jaded perspective of the people that they run into every day. Give us a sense of what that street officer is facing and dealing with on a daily basis.
Well, what I see, Barbara, I think what the patrol officer is dealing with is the history and social media. And because of the social media, it's created a certain level of expectation. So when an officer does approach them, you know, they go to, oh, my gosh, here we go. So in that moment, the officer should already realize that he has to overcome this level of thought process. So what I tend to train people on and make them very aware of is the 5-second rule. Within 5 seconds, the person will look at you to decide if they can trust you, like you, if you're going to do harm to them. And as an officer, I have to be my best within those first 5 seconds in order to get beyond the badge. Because as long as I sit behind that badge, that's all they will see. That's all they will hear. They will finish my thoughts, my actions, before I even open my mouth. So that conscious awareness of your space, your attitude, your tone, your body language. That's what I think will help officers, and that's what I tend to teach, because I can only deal with the history if you express it to me. And I worked in a community that people they look just like me. I quickly realized, yes, they may look like me, but I don't speak their language. It took me 3 to 6 months to go in weekly just to sit, so I can cross those barriers so they can understand and I can understand. I think that's what we have to do. We have to go sit at the table before things jump off. I can't wait for the 911 call, because 911 happens every single day.
So, Kelvin, do you subscribe to the theory that it would be better if our officers were from our communities, or can anybody police anybody?
I think anybody can police anybody. I think herein is what needs to be examined and addressed. Daniel said something, the 5-second rule, and he is spot on. Most people operate on what is known as the expressive level, and it requires no thought. We make value judgments on what we immediately see. It requires no thought, and we make value judgments on people without any real information whatsoever. Friend, foe, nice, mean, what have you. And as Daniel said, he's right. You need to put forth your best effort. But along those same lines, when someone is upset, angry, what have you, how about what is it that they're angry about? What is the root cause of their anger? Why is this person expressing hostility towards me? Is it because of my uniform, or is it because of the action, or just what have you? You asked a question earlier to Larry, what keeps you up at night? And for me, I think it has to do with how we combat the stereotypes and the images that we have of black people, black men, that are portrayed in the media as always mad, angry, going to harm you, and so forth. And these things have a negative effect on white males who are police officers and black males who are police officers and females and so forth, because that's all that you see them. But the fact is that that's not the sum total of who we are as black people.
So, all right, and I got to ask this question. So it feels like in this time and moment that, when you look at the fact that within 24 hours of Derek Chauvin being found guilty, there were 6 people who are fatally shot. It feels like shoot first, ask questions later is the norm. I guess my question is, officers are not necessarily trained to automatically pull their weapon before they try to de-escalate the situation in another way. Is that correct, Kelvin?
That is correct to state. But I had a good friend of mine say something to me years ago that still holds true, and you have to do your best to make sure you train it out of people. Police officers point their guns at problems they don't know how to solve.
Wow.
And you see it all the time. And I was like, why are you taking out your gun? This is not even a situation that calls for deadly force. So our challenge as a law enforcement leader, whether you're retired, a captain, police chief, whatever, throughout the organization is to train people not to do those things that you somehow subconsciously are acting upon. Train not to do certain things. We do a simple thing, and I think the chief and Daniel will support me. One of the things that we teach officers is you never put your finger on the trigger when you take your hand out on the gun, okay? Until you're ready, till you know that you're going to fire that gun.
Until you're ready to make the shot.
And we go down the range and we practice this left and right all the time. And I guarantee you, when we look at news clips where someone is being shot, I'm like, why is his finger on the trigger? He's already made that decision. He's going to pull the trigger. He has somehow self-consciously short-circuited all the training that we have given them over the years. So what is it that's doing it? Is it that implicit bias in the back of his mind that says that this person is dangerous or I want to go home? We need to be able to figure out what that is and address that so that is not the case. But again, for me, your gun should not come out the holster unless you know that you are going to have to use deadly force. And that's what we train our people to do.
So, Chief Boone, I've heard people in the community, particularly in the African-American community, also talk about the fact that that the civilians' reaction could be the reason why people pull their guns. And let me tell you what I'm talking about. So, for example, the young man Dante, who was in the car where the officer thought she was using her taser, when in fact she was using her gun. But he was detained and then tried to jump back in the car. This whole idea of flight or fight. Is that a legitimate cause for what happens to these people?
Well, we are the professionals, okay, and we have to react accordingly. We have to start training our officers. It's okay to lose in certain situations. We feel as though we have to win no matter the cost. Mm-hmm. In that particular situation you're highlighting, they should have let him simply drive away. They knew who he was. They had his information. They could get him another day. Mm-hmm. One of the things I preach here is don't reach into a car. If you know who the individual is, you can live another day to get that individual. I will guarantee you the officer that thought she had her taser has a history of operational issues. I say this all the time. Under conflict, you're going to demonstrate who you truly are. No amount of training can fix that, which is why you have to hire the right people to start with. You see people in the training academy all the time that you can immediately identify he or she will not work out, not a good fit. I always have a huge suspicion, Barbara, when you have police academies that start with 35 and graduate 35. I can assure you they are passing individuals through a process that they are not equipped to do.
Mm-hmm. I see, Daniel, kind of a smirk and a smile on your face when in terms of what Chief Boone just said.
Chief Boone's on point. We can't just fill slots. We need to find the right personality, and they're out there. They are. I did 30 years, and by no means am I a superhero, but I connect with people. I love people. And because of that, it comes out. Even in the midst of chaos, you can hear people. And those biases that we have, tell you, you watch a lot of TV, you read a lot of papers, whatever, it can create images that can frighten you. When I started the police department, I was not a rookie per se in age. I was 25 years old, having experienced life, lived in Newark. But for some reason, during the police academy, they somehow, through the training, caused me to be afraid of that which looked like me. Mm. So it starts in there. So the messages, it may not be one message, it's a constant overall message that you'll hear. If they start talking about certain neighborhoods and they start painting pictures about it, as soon as you go over there, you're going to start expecting those bad things that officer that was training you experienced. And expectation theory will always work. It will pop up every time.
So the trainer, you got to watch who's doing the training, too. If you're just joining us, we're talking about law enforcement and the Black community with Chief Larry Boone, Norfolk Police Department, Chief Kelvin Wright, Chesapeake Police Department, and law enforcement consultant Daniel Edwards, who specializes in de-escalation and cultural and situational awareness training. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Dan joins us from Chesapeake. Hi, Dan. You're on the air.
Thank you, Barbara. Mm-hmm. I guess my question is maybe for Chief Boone. Is it feasible to change the policing model as it pertains to moving violations? Wouldn't the risk be greatly minimized if we didn't stop and pull over, and instead maybe do something like take a picture? Follow the vehicle, use technology, take a picture, send a ticket in the mail, send a warrant in the mail. Just like if I drove through the tunnel without paying a fine, the toll, I'd get a ticket or I'd get that fine in the mail. Same thing with going through an intersection with a camera at an intersection. If I go through a red light, picture's taken of the plate, and again I receive a fine in the mail.
Okay, thank you for the call, Dan. Chief Boone?
That's an excellent question, and to his point is that's something you're going to see by way of police reform. We have to Stop training that you must win in every situation. Here in Norfolk, I stop officers from pursuits. We were having pursuits on some of the most mundane things, such as an expired tag, and the car end up running over an individual or running into somebody's property. It's not worth it. You're going to see officers reaching into cars doing traffic stops because the person's trying to drive away. But let them go, because if you hang on to that car, more times than likely you're going to be injured. So we need to reform our thinking, and we need to be surgical in our process as what we select, that what we're going to enforce, what we're not going to enforce. When you think about officer-involved shootings, most of those shootings occur with individuals under the influence of drugs or homeless, or more importantly, individuals going through some type of mental crisis. We need to minimize our footprint in those regards, because when you look at the percentages, I think it's like 25% of most officer-involved shootings involve those type of categories. So in the coming future, you're going to see policing change in terms of how we enforce the law. So,
Chief Wright, what do you all, and I'm asking this actually to all of you, what do you tell people now in terms of what to do when they are stopped by police? And I'm referring to what happened to Lieutenant Nazario, who apparently, at least according to reports, did all the things that we tell people to do. Go into a lighted area so that you feel safe. Put your hands out of the window. I mean, all those kinds of things. And yet, we saw what happened to this gentleman. Just bad apples, or do we need to change the way that we address and deal with a traffic stop?
97% of the time, what we tell people to do is correct. The fact is that, as Chief Boone said earlier, there are bad actors out there in law enforcement. I think that if you perhaps look at someone's training and their history, you'll see where this person this was not their first time where something went askew on a traffic stop. As I always say, I, as a citizen, I have some responsibility with that traffic stop as well. I'm going to cooperate. Hopefully the officer will be de-escalated and calm as well. But if he's not, the point is to survive the traffic stop, to tell the story later, so that you can be like the lieutenant and be able to produce the video and show where this person clearly does not belong in law enforcement. But I would dare say that across this country, literally hundreds of thousands of traffic stops are conducted every day, and they end well. But if you have that bad actor, that person, I'm not saying who's having a bad day, if you have a bad actor, someone who's clearly not capable of doing the job, that's what you get. And, and that's part of something we need to think about as well when we talk about law enforcement. The consistency of what you get from coast to coast, north to south, it's different. I cannot tell you what you're going to get outside of Hampton Roads. I dare say that I know the chiefs, I know who they hire, we have a good rapport with one another, and I think that I can clearly say I think we got some good people. But as Larry said, there's some bad actors, and my job as chief is to make sure that those bad actors don't wear the badge, and don't stay in law enforcement, and are not able to catch on some other place once I have released them or they have left my employment.
Daniel, what do you teach the officers to do in terms of when they are approaching a car, in terms of a traffic stop?
Realize that the person had not planned on interacting with them, and they are lost. They have no clue what happened. So first of all, do not ask the person, do you know why I stopped you? Tell them why they were stopped, because that there cuts off half the edge. Tell them who you are and what you represent and why we're looking at each other at this moment. I keep hearing the term bad actors. Part of my class, I ask people, have you ever taken acting lessons? Because that should be a prerequisite. Because when you are a good actor, we use Samuel Jackson. How is it that he can play in all these different roles and you believe it? Because he embodies the person. I wasn't born a police officer. It was a something that I learned how to do, and I practice at it every single day. If you don't practice for these difficult conversations or these people to give you resistance, when it does show up in your face, you're not going to know what to do. You're going to go to that automatic response, as Chief Boone said, and we're going to end up being on CNN.
Our phone lines are lit up, so let's go to the phones. Butch joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Butch. You're on the air.
Hey, Barbara. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
So my question is for all three of the guests, and it involves this issue of civilian oversight. What's your view on it? What do you think its utility? If politicians decide to make the choice to establish boards, how should they be constituted? And how can they be perceived as fair by police, but still reassure the public that that there's useful and adequate oversight?
So we're talking about civilian oversight. Want to start with you, Chief Boone.
So I embrace the CRBs. Here in Norfolk, we are in the embryo stages of adopting a model in which the citizens, as well as the officers, are comfortable with. The only issue I have with respect to civilian oversights is generally when the discipline is left up to the board, they tend to be liberal. They have a very difficult time firing or suspending an individual, for an example, during the holidays. I think the final recommendation with respect to discipline should be left up to the chief of police. There's over 18,000 police departments throughout this country, and I think there's only roughly 160 CRBs that are currently in existence. So with respect to what's happened here in the last year or so, most departments are going to have to find a model in which the citizens approve as well as the officers. But I just want to underscore that final recommendation should be left up to the chief of police.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Butch?
It does, and I think that's a really great point. I've seen that myself with people. Sometimes they don't see the total picture, so that the idea that the chief of police should retain that final authority, it fits well with me, so long as he or she accepts and considers the recommendations of the CRB and factors them into his decision.
Chief Wright, is there a CRB in Chesapeake? I should know that, and I don't.
No, actually, I have a citizen advisory group. My take is I have to agree with Larry in some points. I do believe that discipline, the final discipline, is up to the chief of police. I have that corporate knowledge of what has taken place, this officer's history, what this person has done in detail. And Larry's correct. The data suggests that CRBs are very lenient with regard to discipline. People that when I fire somebody, there's a good reason why they should not be in law enforcement. When I give someone time off, there's a reason why I'm giving them time off. I fired someone, just an example, I fired a couple of people a couple of years ago for being dishonest, for lying. And I went before a grievance panel. They reinstated one and fired the other. Now, mind you, these people were working together, did the exact same thing. What logic does that make? A grievance panel who does not have any say or really, in the day-to-day runnings of the police department, think that they know better than me, than the human resources director, than the city attorney and the city manager, all who have to sign off on my decision. So I have a thing where I believe that the chief of police should be, the buck stops with the chief of police.
Daniel, is there a CRB in Durham?
They do have one, and it's been in place for a few years now. It does work. I support both chiefs in their thoughts. As they say, at the end of the day, it's their decision, and it's based on the facts and the history, and you go from there.
Okay. Let's go to Paul in Norfolk. Hi, Paul. You're on the air.
Hi. Earlier, I think what Chief Boone said, he'd like to know why people see him as, a possible issue when he approaches them. We've been dancing around this for a couple of years now, and it's the drug war. People learn very early, because a lot of people in this country smoke marijuana. They learn early that the police are their enemy. And the police consider public their enemy. They call them scumbags and perps.
Okay, Paul, do you have a specific question? Do you have a specific question you want to ask?
My specific question is, why is the drug war fought so aggressively when it's definitely losing the war to drugs?
Okay. Thank you so much for your call. I will ask our panel to address that. Chief Boone, since he called you out, and I'll start with you.
Okay. Well, we've shifted our focus with respect to the drug war. As you know, Virginia will be legalizing marijuana. One of the things that we train our officers to do is to treat people with dignity and respect. And I think Daniel mentioned earlier, when you encounter a citizen, you tell them why you're stopping them and give them a voice as to why you're stopping them. And then if you decide to make an arrest for drugs, if that's the case, you go ahead and do so. But the mindset as to war on drugs, that's gone by the way of the dodo bird. We are focusing now on procedural justice and how do we go about interacting with citizens of the Commonwealth. But if you break the law with respect to possession of drugs and things of that nature, we're certainly going to enforce the law. But we're not what we used to be 10 to 15 years ago with respect to drugs.
Okay, let's go to Brandon in Norfolk. Hi, Brandon. You're on the air.
Good afternoon, Ms. Sam, and good afternoon, gentlemen. How are you today?
Doing good. What's your question?
That's good. I just wanted to make a statement with regards to the topic today, and that is, I think, as I believe was Chief Boone said earlier in the conversation, that it's important that people survive the stop. And I think we are seeing such an increase now with the younger people that are being shot or killed, whatever the case may be, when these stops are, because somebody's not talking to them. I know when my mom passed, I was 47. When my dad passed, I was 47. When my mom passed, I was 49. And I always got that admonishment: if the police stop you, remember, yes, officer, no officer, and what if anything else goes on, we'll get it settled in court. And I think there's a disconnect now with parents really talking with the kids like that. And I'm not one that's had a lot of trouble with the police. I'm just saying, it's just that little reminder before you leave, which is just that's another subject altogether. But I think if someone kind of is there to keep plugging that in, survive the stop, and then we can get it handled. That's all I wanted to say today.
Okay, thank you, Brandon, for that call. We appreciate that. Daniel, you want to react to what Brandon just said?
Yeah, I hear people say survive the stop, but I also don't hear people saying respect the situation, because if you come at a situation expecting something bad, you can create a scenario. I've dealt with hundreds of traffic stops, and it was real simple. I just wanted to tell you your tag expired, or you ran something, or whatever, and all of a sudden I get all of this bravado and this negative energy, and I'm like, you know what? Just stop. Just stop.
So and we do have to look at police officers as human beings is the point. Go ahead, Larry.
I was going to say, a couple weeks ago, I had a lady pass me on a residential street, and I started to stop her. I said, okay, it's not worth it. But she just happened to be going the same place I was going, Starbucks drive-through. So I stopped her then. I knocked on the window, and as Daniel said, she became unglued. She yelled at me, what are you stopping me for? What did I do? And my position, the things I tell my officers, you take the high road. And I simply said, ma'am, you passed me on that residential street. Perhaps you didn't know that was against the law. And she said, are you taking me to jail? I said, no, ma'am, I'm just giving you a warning. That's all I wanted to do. She said, well, thank you. Long story short, she ended up buying my coffee for me later.
Barbara,
go ahead, Kelvin.
If I may, Larry and I were on a conference call together months ago, and Larry said something that was just, it was providential. Larry said, sometimes you just need to give somebody a break. Well, early in that day, on my way home, some guy passes me doing like 90 miles per hour on Military Highway, and I stopped the guy, and he's having a very bad situation. And he would not talk to me, would not do all kinds of things. In fact, I think he was going to flee but his car cut off. But anyway, I eventually got the guy calmed down, had him focus on me, and gave the guy a break. And it's like Larry said, sometimes somebody just needs a break. And so we tell our officers the best way to make a friend is on a traffic stop. You need not be contentious, what have you. But like Daniel says, hey, I was going to just tell you, hey, your tax expired, you need to get that taken care of. Or, you got something, whatever. And that's the way we view it. The traffic stop, it's not about revenue. It's not about taking people to jail. It's about being
even in those small towns, Kelvin.
And that's just it. I cannot speak for the small towns. But Barbara, let me say this. I know your time is running short. When I first took over as chief of police 13 years ago, our department was writing 60,000 tickets a year, far more than anybody else. And I said, to what end, guys? Why are we writing tickets? I don't care about tickets. Well, so we just, self-imposed. We're not going to write that many tickets. We're not going to do it. My boss came to me, said, hey, for what it's worth, one of the judges has approached me and says, is there something wrong with the police department? They're not writing a lot of tickets. And I said, apparently people are getting the message. This is not about revenue generation for us. I do not believe, and we should not believe, in policing for profit.
So I want to ask you guys a question. What is it, and we got about 6 minutes left in the show, what do you know about policing that you wish the community understood so that we can start to have more trust? Let me start with you, Kelvin.
I wish more people would take time to just take a deep breath when they encounter the police officer. And remember this, we're all human. At the end of the day, I breathe the same air as you breathe. We eat food. We're human beings. We have more in common than we have this dissimilar. We really do. And I'm the one that was tasked with doing a job that nobody else is doing or able to do under our laws. And I want to make sure that our people are treating people with kindness, compassion, and being fair and being professional. That's the way I want our policing to be done in Chesapeake.
Okay. Chief Boone?
I would want the community to know we are far better today than we were back in yesteryears. Lisa mentioned, that law enforcement started as the slave patrol, and then we graduated to Jim Crow enforcement, and then we had our time with respect to stopping or trying to interfere with civil rights, and then we had mass incarceration, and here we are now with George Floyd, okay? George Floyd is a monumental incident that's going to greatly change law enforcement as we know it. But you know what? We are far better. We're better trained. We hire better individuals. So just know at each incident, we get better, and we're going to be good. We'll recover, as I said previously, and there'll be another incident 10 years from now, and we'll hit the reset button again.
Daniel, what do you know? What do you want the community to know?
I want them to know the same as the chief has said, but also what I want them to understand, give me space to grow. My name is not Derek Chauvin. My name is Daniel. Whatever happened there, I wasn't there. And my goal is to make certain that the community in which I serve know that I'm out here taking and doing the best I can to make sure that they're comfortable and that they're happy. That's it.
Mm-hmm. So what are you guys doing to root out, or what is the conversation among police officers about the quote-unquote bad apples? I mean, did Chauvin, what Chauvin did that piss you guys off?
Absolutely.
Well, let me say this regarding Chauvin. I was interviewed regarding that a couple of days after it happened, and I didn't mix words. I said that he should be fired and he should be charged. I think I was one of the first police chiefs in the country to say it just that way. Because when you looked at the incident, there was no time for us to circle the wagon and say the customary, well, let the investigation take place. Let's look at due process, because my eyes did not lie to me, and I'm sure it didn't lie to the most layman person as well. So that case was pivotal, as I said previously, and it's going to be around a minute with respect to how we go about reforming policing.
Okay, Kelvin, your response to it.
Barbara, I teach ethics, and one of the things I've always said is that it is good officers that make bad officers possible, because good officers see the things that bad officers do and don't say anything. So actually, from my positions throughout my career, is simply this. You have an obligation to tell somebody or to intervene if you see somebody doing something wrong, because these people are going to do something that causes great harm to the individual and to our profession. So for me, I'm okay with officers snitching. They don't see it as snitching. They see it as protecting the profession and protecting the people that we serve. You have an obligation to intervene. You have an obligation to speak up and tell a supervisor.
Daniel?
It's real simple. I am my brother's keeper.
Amen.
I don't care what your rank is. We all have the opportunity or the propensity to have a bad day. And if you catch me on that bad day, if no one is around to help me, I'm subject to do something stupid. So I need other officers to check me, to know my norm, to know what I would normally do. If I'm doing something that's extra, they need to say, hey, Daniel, I'll take you. I'll help you out.
And work together. So will there be renewed trust ultimately in the Black community with the police department?
Yes.
Short answer from each of you.
Yes.
Yes. Daniel? Yes.
Yes,
Larry?
it has to. Policing is not going away. We're just going to do it a little different.
Okay. Daniel, Larry?
Absolutely. Again, we'll hit the reset button and we'll do the hard work to rebuild trust. The challenge now, though, Barbara, now it used to be you could do something in your own backyard and that would impact you. But now, if it happens anywhere in the country, you got to wear it.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He's right. It seems like we own it.
We own it. Absolutely. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for this conversation. I really appreciate it. It was very important to me that we hear your side of the story also. So that is Chief Larry Boone with the Norfolk Police Department, Chief Kelvin Wright with Chesapeake Police Department, and law enforcement consultant Daniel Edwards, who specializes in de-escalation and cultural and situational awareness training with criticalperceptions.com. Before we go this evening, a reminder that the city of Norfolk needs your help. Norfolk City Council persons Mamie Johnson, Danica Royster, and Paul Riddick are holding a town hall on creating safer streets. They want to know where the city needs sidewalks, crosswalks, bike lanes, or slower speeds to make it safe for walking and biking. The virtual town hall is Thursday, May 6th from 6 to 7:30. For more information, visit multimodalnorfolk.com. And if you'd like to hear this show again or share it with a friend, visit our website, anotherviewradio.org, and download the podcast. And please sign up for our eView newsletter, a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. We're on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter at Barbara Ham Lee. Our theme music was an original composition, especially for Another View, by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Todd Washburn is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Please remember, everyone 16 and older is eligible for the COVID vaccine, so get your shot. Stay safe, everyone, and let's get together again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever, whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.